It is the most watched documentary in Netflix history. It's had 28 million households around the world tuning in to watch Harry and Meghan so far.
Explosive revelations emerged in the final instalment yesterday, including Meghan's mental health and a real rift between the brothers.
My brother scream and shout at me, and my father say things that just simply weren't true, and my grandmother, quietly sit there and sort of take it all in.
Well, have they revealed too much? Joining us to discuss is commentator and activist Femi Oluwole and director of Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. Is it common sense to, when you feel like you have been battered and bruised by headlines that are not true and they have not stopped, and you feel that you're being briefed against by your own family, is it common sense, then, to go in front of the cameras and say, hang on a minute, let's just tell you exactly what happened?
No, I think what we've seen in this documentary is actually a massive own goal on the part of the Sussexes. I think that they have firstly opened themselves up. You just said yourself, that this Netflix documentary has been watched by so many people. And obviously they want to tell their truth, but we know it's not the truth. It's their experience of it. It's one side of the story. But the other side of the story, the royal family, aren't able to actually they can't reasonably put forward their side of what has happened. And even from the first couple of episodes, the fact checkers went through with a fine-tooth comb and immediately found all sorts of even contradictions between things that they had themselves previously said about their early dating life. So
they could, but the tragic thing is Harry knows that they won't, that they can't, that William's not going to put his side of the story. He's blaming the media, he's blaming the institution, but then he's also blaming his brother through the media, who can't answer back. I mean, isn't Harry doing just the thing that he said was done to him? Exactly,
and I think that that's the way that it's going to be perceived by a lot of people. If you look at just the opinion polls, they have absolutely plummeted in the opinion of the British people. I think that what they've done comes across as really unseemly, and it also comes across as extremely self-indulgent. For example, them complaining about the size of Frogmore Cottage, which is a house that they were living in at the taxpayers' expense.
Yeah. Femi?
So, the idea that the royal family is this helpless creature that doesn't defend itself and won't go out and set the record straight. I mean, the whole point of the documentary is they did set the record straight. When there was the issue about one of the tabloid stories about how William bullied Harry out of the royal family, they put out a joint statement, even though Harry hadn't signed it. After the Oprah interview, you saw Prince William saying that the royal family is definitely not a racist family. They go out on record to defend themselves all the time. The whole point that Harry was making was that they didn't defend Meghan, and what you learn from this documentary is a good example of the real-world consequences of when the media is extremely aggressive and, in several cases, racist. Because we saw what happened when they were introducing Meghan with a straight out of Compton, even though she's not from Compton, just a blatant racial jab. We saw the unfair treatment of Meghan when it came to praising Kate for eating avocados, whereas when Meghan ate avocados, she was implicated in drought and murder because of how they're made. It's a completely unfair thing, and the consequences of it were people were sending death threats to her. She was in that documentary crying because she didn't know if her children would be safe. There were real-world consequences to that.
What do you think that this does for them as a couple, though? Because once you've set the record straight, quote-unquote, then what? Because he has a book coming out. You do wonder, the publishers must be having their... they must be worried, because what else is there to say? And the question this morning is, have they revealed too much?
I think... I personally think that essentially we have heard their side now. I don't think there's that much left to tell. I think if they go on and do more interviews, more documentaries...
But will there be interest, though, is my question, I suppose, Femi? Because you're clearly sort of pro-Harry and Meghan. Would you say that?
I'd say that I generally don't care.
Yeah.
The issue is what happens when this political football gets used to push people in the wrong direction.
Isn't it, Femi? I mean, so... I totally understand and sympathise with what you're saying about the treatment of Meghan at certain points. Isn't this just like a tragedy to see two brothers who had such a terrible time in their growing up now fighting it out in public? I mean, is it wise for them to be doing this? Shouldn't Harry have been thinking, I'm bigger? And actually, doesn't it feel a bit small and petty?
So, in terms of the brothers fighting, yes, that's something that doesn't have that much public interest. The issue is Harry is right to speak out about this because...
On Netflix?
I think...
For money?
I think he's right to speak out about it because people...
But in this way?
Because he's the biggest people... Harry and Meghan are the ones currently defending the royal family right now because they're the ones who are actually trying to make the royal family better. Because the new generations, especially Gen Z, want the royal family, want the monarchy to be an anti-racist institution. And they're the ones actually going out and saying, it must be.
But his brother's going to be the next king and he's attacking him. How's that defending the royal family?
By saying that he needs to do better. And
because his brother is racist?
Because his brother's failing to call it out.
And just a final word to Emma before we move on. Your view on this, in that clearly it's being played to an American audience, isn't it? You feel that this isn't really for the Brits.
Yeah,
it's for the British media. He wants to have a pop at them quite clearly because he's angry. But in terms of popularity, their life is in America now. Yeah, and I think it looks like revenge as well. It looks like they're being vengeful in the way that they've approached this, because they are just slinging unverifiable mud at his brother. But yeah, I think this does appeal to a British audience, to an American audience, particularly the way that I think it stereotypes Brits, it mocks Brits, particularly that awful curtsy that Meghan did.
Most Brits don't do that.
I think, well, I know. Well,
most towns don't have town criers.
The way that they use particularly American footage as illustrations of the way that the Brits treated them, and also the fact that they use particular footage of Brits that make us look like we're just an eccentric bunch of racists. We are, well, we're not racist, but we are quite eccentric in this country, I would say. We've asked you on Twitter, have Prince Harry and Meghan revealed too much? 62% say yes, and 38% said no. And the interesting thing for Netflix is that they've paid £88 million, and everybody seems to be watching it, whether you agree or don't agree. So in the end, whether they win or not, Netflix has won.
I've not watched it because I just find it, don't have a side. I just feel an overwhelming, terrible sadness about this. It's just
I think that's
tragic.
true. It's a family breakdown, isn't it? Femi, thank you for your point of view. Thank you to you,
Definitely.
Emma, as well. Both of you speaking common sense, even though you're from the Common Sense Society.